Okay, so we're on episode 3 of the podcast, so we have our first guest of the podcast today.
Oh, really?
You're the first guest.
That's
it's just
amazing.
Everybody's been stuck with me and Kat the last time, and we're arguing about AI and
No
technology. So we've got Alex today. Do you want to introduce yourself? You know the most about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Alexandra. I'm a lecturer here at Coventry University. I've been a student here. I've been here for a long time now. And I specialise in positive psychology and environmental psychology. I'm literally at the end of my PhD, so almost Dr. Alexandra. And I'm here today to talk about mindfulness and new trends in green and environmental mindfulness.
Okay, awesome. I know when you mentioned about the topic, you were like, well, it's summer and people are going to be going outside. And that's the point where I then had like my sudden realisation where I was going, oh God, I'm going to have to go outside. There's not really an excuse. So you're saying green mindfulness. Do you want to tell us what green mindfulness means?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one because no one knows what it actually means. So let's break it down. We think about mindfulness first, right? When we say mindfulness, the most kind of adopted definition we come across is that, well, it's present moment awareness. So whatever you do, wherever you go, you're just there. You're not thinking about something else. You're not multitasking. You're there, and you're there in a way that you're non-judgmental. So that means we don't think, okay, this is a good experience. I don't want to feel that. You don't go too much into an introspection that just goes into overthinking, maybe even. So you're just there with your thoughts. You acknowledge the thoughts. And then that's how we see mindfulness in a secular way. The traditional view of mindfulness is a bit different. It's thinking more about ethics, it's thinking more about our relationship with others, our relationship with nature, and for a long time we've kind of avoided that side. And with the green mindfulness and environmental mindfulness, it's almost like a bridge between how we see mindfulness as, okay, pay attention, and that, okay, it's not just about me, it's my relationship with nature. So it started as green mindfulness in a way that, okay, we interact with our environment in a very present way. We pay attention to our environment, we pay attention to our impact on our environment. So it's in some way an umbrella term. It's not just going into greenery, but it's about how we feel about when we see the trees, how we feel when we listen to the birds, how we feel when we interact with nature. So there's a lot about that. The interesting thing is that we have a lot of research coming out about this, but we have no actual definition or agreed definition on this. Not even the papers that say they measure green mindfulness, which they don't really measure green mindfulness, don't attempt to define it.
Okay.
When they try and measure green mindfulness, how do you measure mindfulness anyway, just as a general concept? Because I always worry that I'm doing mindfulness wrong to start with whenever I do mindfulness. But like, how do you measure being is it self-report type stuff, or kind of like qualitative interviews, or?
So it's usually self-report. We have questionnaires for state mindfulness, so how mindful you are right now, and trait mindfulness, how mindful you are typically as you go about. And generally we measure it by how well can you describe the things around you. What's your attitude towards yourself? Are you non-judgmental? So the non-judgment, going back to it, is a big element into measuring it. How well can you observe the things around you, your inner states as well? And are you aware? So do you act with awareness? These are the main kind of elements of mindfulness that we look at when we measure mindfulness. To measure green mindfulness, there is no scale. So people attempt to measure it based on an awareness of the environment or how sustainable they are, which that's almost an entirely different thing.
Yeah.
So anything that you see quantitative, green mindfulness, it's impossible to actually measure it because we don't have any measure available.
Yeah.
So it comes across in interviews more when you say it. Yes, people talk about the quality of their presence with nature. They talk about how they feel when we breathe in the presence of nature. They talk about these things, but yeah, in a qualitative way.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, we talk about this with our undergraduates quite a bit, don't we? Like having to operationalise a variable. From a quant perspective, it must be quite tricky because is it attention that you're measuring? Is it, like you say, awareness of environmental and social factors and how green you are in your behaviour? Or, these are very, very different things that are going to give you very different results.
Yeah, so we have very different ways to go with it, as you say, and many ways to think about them. So I know there are PhD students who are now developing scales related to the environment and mindfulness, but they're not published yet. It's some students I met at the conference, quite interesting scales, and I'm really looking forward for them to come out, but they're not there yet. And I think another aspect that's really important to think about is going back to that more traditional view of mindfulness. When it comes to the nature element of it, that is missing from all the scales we have for secular mindfulness as well. So it's a lot of attention measurement really currently. And I found that in my research as well. For my PhD, I was looking at mindfulness and pro-environmental behavior and connection with nature. And I found that mindfulness wasn't such a strong predictor, as strong as we thought it would be based on qualitative research and people practicing mindfulness and saying that, well, it led me to think a lot more about my impact, it led me to act more sustainably. We've not seen that in the actual studies. And I think how I see the explanation is, as we measure mindfulness is a very self-oriented construct, whereas thinking in the context of nature, that's a bit less self-oriented, it's less egocentric, it's more eco-centered.
Eco-centered, I like that word.
So there's obviously going to be some crossover between like regular mindfulness and green, and might not, kind of like what you were saying, might not be as much as you would expect. So I guess if you're working in this area and there's not a scale, how have you defined it then, if there's no like common definition?
Yeah, so I looked at how we see mindfulness generally, and I've actually struggled with this for a long time, which is why for the final study of my PhD I used secondary data, qualitative secondary data, and I analysed stories related to climate change and climate experiences from about 200 people, and I tried to see whether common characteristics of mindfulness, again, the ability to describe their own experience, the ability to observe changes, climate changes especially, how they act non-judgmentally, how they act with awareness. So all that seemed to have been present in those stories, and I saw, okay, it's about our ability to observe our reactions to the climate change, but also the ability to observe changes around. So how does the environment changes? Now that's a bit tricky sometimes with the mobility happening today, but people who tend to stay in the same place for a longer period of time, they tend to see environmental changes. People tend to have certain reactions to environmental changes, and many times when they become more aware, they start to take action. So we've seen that acting with awareness component of mindfulness translated into acting with environmental awareness.
That makes a lot of sense. I think I wish I was slightly more green than I am. So I am fully in support of kind of like green causes, environmentalism, all those kind of things. I just think that sometimes I just, maybe it's because I'm busy or I've got a lot on, or I could be more mindful, definitely. So I'm definitely one of those people that maybe doesn't wash out enough bean or soup tins, or I'll throw them into the recycling, not washed, those kind of things, and I feel really bad about it afterwards. But I think you're right, if I had it more on my doorstep as being kind of evident, so say I don't know, lived in a coastal town where I saw the erosion, or kind of, I think that would bring it home so much more. And I just think I do need to be more mindful generally. But love the environment. Don't want to put myself out there as being a kind of like I do. No. And I do little things, like I always buy clothes like second hand, so I'm definitely against fast fashion, and that's like my only kind of thing that I put aside to that I know that I'm doing sort of thing. But there are other things I definitely could do. But I think you're right, if it was more prevalent in my day-to-day, I reckon I probably would do more.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one, because how everything is made today, it's very hard to be mindful of all these things. It's really hard to act with environmental awareness, because the choices we have, at least the choices that we have to be more convenient, are not readily available. More sustainable choices, and you need to think actively about all these aspects of your life. You need to think actively, okay, what kind of fabric do I put on my skin, what kind of skincare do I use, so all these things, they're related to mindfulness, but it takes so much cognition to actually consistently think about everything. And I'm not saying we should think about all these things all the time, because when you practice it, it becomes second nature, so you don't need to actively think about it. But to start thinking about it, that is quite difficult. But I'm really happy to see, you're thinking about some of these things. And I think it's not about being perfect at all. If we all wanted to just strive and be fully environmental, we would go crazy and we wouldn't do any of those things. We don't have the capacity to do those things. We don't have the resources to do those things. So I think, as long as we do the best we can with the resources we have, then you're doing your part.
I do find it challenging. I don't know about you guys, because you're saying like there's a lot of cognition, lots of planning. Like I try to live green, because like I buy secondhand clothes. Like I don't have a car. Like I share a car with my wife, and she drives to work 'cause she needs to, but I take the bus or I walk wherever I can. One of the big things though is greenwashing. So much greenwashing, where all these companies are like, oh yeah, our products are sustainably developed, and then when you have to go into like weeks worth of research into that company and how they conduct themselves to go, that's not actually sustainably developed. Like you're just going through like these loopholes.
It is.
It's crazy. Like how are we supposed to be? Like, I suppose this is maybe my challenge with like, I want to be more like eco, green, mindful, but there's this like huge wall in front of me where I'm going, okay, I'm buying this stuff because it says that it's eco. I pay like an extra, I think it's like £10 a month on my energy bills so that it's all carbon offset, and then another £10 so that it comes from wind farms and stuff like that, trying to do this stuff. But it constantly feels like, I buy like squash, I buy Vimto or something like that, and it goes, it's 90% recycled material, but like, does this actually help? Am I just being tricked into feeling like I'm being mindful? Like, where does it start and where does it end? I don't know if anybody else has these problems.
I think they're really common problems, actually. It's very misleading. And generally, less is more, so the less you can get of everything, that is the best. So obviously we still need some things, so when we get them, again, we need to go by the label many times. We need to think critically about it as we think about all of our other choices. But we can't really go about, okay, I don't trust the system, I don't trust this and I don't trust that, because then that's really going to affect your mental health, and then you end up not feeling comfortable buying anything, not being comfortable eating anything. If we look at the ingredients, you know, we are left out with nothing. So yeah, it's important to consider for as many areas as you can, because at the end of the day, whatever is good for the environment is good for you. There is a strong connection there. Going back to the labels, for example, I'm quite keen on using very good fabrics, natural fabrics generally for my clothes. Is something I had from my mom from such a young age, and I used to mock her for that.
The genetics are strong.
It is.
Good genes.
And then I realised when they say 100% organic cotton, that doesn't mean it's 100% cotton. It's just that the cotton that's in there is organic. Yeah. Which I was like, how is this possible? So like you're saying, it's so misleading. So we need to read the fine print many times, but we can only do as much as we can with that. We can't live our life around that, because we'd end up with nothing. So there is a fine balance to have, as with everything else.
I think it's really interesting what you said about just consuming less in general. I've never really thought of environmentalism as being about... I mean, it is, but not primarily consuming less. Like, to me, environmentalism is about consuming things differently. But actually, if you frame it more as just getting less stuff, buying less stuff, maybe doing less stuff to a certain extent, and not taking those trips or whatever, I don't know whether or not actually maybe that's harder or easier for people to kind of adapt to. Is it easier to get someone to do things differently, or just not to do them at all? Because we're so kind of hardwired to acquire stuff. We want all the nice things, be it like food, sweets, crisps, chocolates, or all the nice clothes, all the shiny kind of things that we can buy. And obviously we're in a world where everything is marketed to make you want it. I could definitely get on board with the less stuff, because I can see the direct benefit to me as well, in that I would be then saving money. But I'm just wondering whether or not do studies look at whether or not it's more effective to kind of try and persuade people to have less, or to change habits? Does that make sense?
It's both, and it really depends on individual differences as well, and time perspective is a really important thing as well, and the community that you have around you, what mindset do they have? Because if we think about clothes, me and my mum swap clothes all the time. When I get bored of them, I give it to her. When she gets bored of hers, she gives them to me. We even wear the same shoe size, so that's really helpful. So in that way, you know, we still have new things, but from the other. So swapping clothes, swapping things has become really popular now. So you're not really... You have more in some way, but you don't consume more. Vinted has become very popular, different websites. So we kind of keep reusing what we have. Reusing is a big thing as well. So it's not just less, but reusing, and kind of saving some life. With your example with the food as well, I'm not sure if they published it, to be honest, but they were doing some research around whether if you eat a good quality chocolate, because if you're paying attention to how it melts into your mouth, so a bit of mindful eating as well, but it's going to last you a lot longer. You're just going to need a little bit of chocolate and you'll have enough for satiety. And compared to a cheaper chocolate that you keep getting and you eat a lot more of that. So thinking about, you know, that small scale, buying a chocolate that's really good quality, that's maybe £3, but it's lasting you as much as 3 other chocolates, that's £1 or £1.50, and it's much better for yourself, it's more ethically sourced and everything. That is something as well. So there are very small things that we can do as well.
I can definitely get on board with the chocolate example, and I'm so thinking now, like, because I am typical, we'll go to Aldi and get the 49p really cheap chocolate, but you're right, you can just eat through a whole bar of that and it's nothing. But if it was a big Cadbury's or something even more fancy, that does last so much longer, and you've got to think, how many more planes did it take to ship the 3 bars and the all that was involved versus the one? So
and I think we, especially with the generation coming now, there is a lot of contradiction. They want lots of stuff, but at the same time they want to be minimalistic. So we see a lot of trends, and some of them are working, a lot of trends as in, do a colourful walk, for example. That's mindful walking, really. And it's been a trend, I think, 1 or 2 years ago. Everyone on TikTok was doing colourful walks, and they were literally doing mindfulness and posting it on TikTok, and they'd not realised. Having less things in your room, especially I think our generation, we grew up with lots of stuff and we didn't like it. So a lot of us are now going for, we don't need that many stuff. We don't need to keep everything. We don't need all that. So there are trends, and social media is in some way helping with that as well.
I picked up on something that maybe Kat said that kind of fits with this. A lot of the time, I think a lot of eco stuff tends to be characterised as being really boring. So Kat mentioned you consume less, but you also mentioned you do less. And part of me wonders do you actually have to do less? Because you could go on a flight to, I don't know, you go to Spain or something, and there's that massive environmental impact of flying and all of the little bits that are involved in that. But I don't even necessarily think you have to do less. You could probably end up doing more, because you can do more local stuff, get on public transport and go down to the nearest beach, at least. I mean, we're in Coventry, we're basically in the middle of the country. The nearest beach is hours away. But I mean, when I used to live in Wales, there was 30 different beaches around me, and the local half an hour drive between all of them, and the mountains and stuff. And I think something that I always noticed is that I only ever went up into the mountains once, and I lived there for 14 years.
Wow.
And even then I didn't go to the top. It was an Easter break, and it was really snowy, and me and my friends went to try to build an igloo. We went up with these big tubs to build snow breaks. It didn't go very well. But that was the only time I ever actually tried to go up into the mountains. And again, even going to the beach and stuff, it was kind of but it's just I think the mentality is, well, yes, it's going to be there. I live here and it's going to be there, and I can go there whenever I want. But going abroad, well, that's something I don't normally have access to, and this is a special thing. So I wonder if there's that attitude that needs to be kind of approached. I'm going to say society-wide, because it seems to be a common view that you've got this on your doorstep and you just don't really do anything with it because it's always going to be there.
You're very right about it, and I picked on something which I know research says that as well. This is quite a localized issue though. This is a UK thing. I'm not sure it's because of how the nature is here, although there is a lot of nature, whether it's because of, social norms generally, but this is a UK thing, and this is one of the things I really struggled to understand when I came here, actually, because me, coming from a very green area from Romania, we used to use that nature to its full potential. We would always be up in the hills, up in the mountains, just somewhere, having a barbecue outside, just camping near the riverside, just always camping, just always being outside, always being in nature. We had it very close, and we've always interacted with it. So I know other countries are promoting using the local nature in that way as well. And I'm saying using nature, I feel very bad saying that. But it's, interacting with it. And I think that is something that is missing here in the UK. Why specifically? I'm not 100% sure. There's definitely a multitude of factors. others. But yeah, it's about familiarizing yourself with the nature we have around, and we have so much nature around. We have, even here, we've got the Malvern Hills, we've got so many different little parks, the Bluebell forest, I think like half an hour, 20 minutes drive from here. I go there every spring, it's so lovely. So we've got things to do, but we've not normalised it here, I think.
I wonder if that's partly to do with the weather as well, though. It's like we've got this kind of almost hobbit mentality in the UK, in that we're like, we just kind of hunker down into our houses and we have like 2 or 3 weeks of sun a year. Because I know what you mean. I think it's definitely that having the outside in. I don't know if it is a very broad, more of a European thing. My best friend is Dutch, and when we were growing up, her mum used to constantly have the windows open all the time. My brother lives in Germany, his wife is German, they live in Germany. Again, windows are always open. It's just a thing that is always done, that you clear the air, you invite the outside in. But I don't know if that is because of the climate differences, although you wouldn't have thought that maybe it would be all that different necessarily between Germany and kind of like here, but it's definitely a different perspective or a mindset. Maybe it's because it's so damp in the UK. That's the only other thing I can think. Like
if you think about the other northern countries, if you think about Sweden, all these countries in the area, they don't have great weather either. True. And it's in their almost like bloodline now to actually go out still, and it doesn't matter the weather.
Babies and prams outside.
Exactly. I've seen a very new one in Netherlands. They've now built some playgrounds for kids to go out when it's raining, and it's literally by design gathering all the water for the kids there, so they have all those playgrounds, like play areas with the water, with the natural water, and they can stay outside even if it's heavy rain and everything. So it's encouraging them to go out no matter the weather.
That's amazing.
A part of me makes me wonder, like with that point, whenever you see adverts for like personal tablets and stuff for laundry, to me in my mind, like your kid going out and getting wet and muddy is always like a bad thing. You got to get the special laundry detergent to deal with that, because that's not good. But this idea that like no, we should be building places specifically to do that. I mean, I always wear like walking boots that was like waterproof, and I was like having a little bit of a stomp through puddles as I go. But I'm like, but I mean the puddle gets up to like maybe my ankle at worst. I'm pretty big as humans go. But compared to like a little child, they'd be up to their knees in the same puddle really. But yeah, I don't know if maybe it's kind of like that attitude that like we view going out and getting dirty and getting cold and getting messy as like bad things, rather than like training ourselves essentially to go, it's just, you just do that. Like there's nothing wrong with having to scrape a bit of mud off of your shoes or something.
It is really interesting. Like I just wonder if anyone's ever looked back at it kind of like historically as well. Like maybe we need to now also bring in like a historian to sort of talk about kind of this perspective. I don't know if it's got anything to do with like industrialisation, maybe kind of just the outside was just not necessarily seen as but I don't know if that just would have been very, specific to certain areas of the UK, like Birmingham, London, the smog-filled streets of kind of like early century sort of England. But yeah, why is it that we don't go outside? I'm just going to assume it's the weather.
I always complain it's cold, because like the idea of like opening the windows to air out, and it's like, we should be doing it in the UK. All these people complain about having damp. I complain, we get mould on your walls and stuff because you just don't really air out your house. And the main reason that I don't do it is I get bloody cold. I'm freezing. I've got this big like hoodie thing that I'm always wearing whenever I work from home and somebody calls me. If it ever takes me like a couple of minutes to pick up, it's because I get my hoodie off and get something like professional on to answer the call with. But like the idea of like leaving your windows open for half an hour it literally gives me the chills.
Every morning it's a ritual with my brother. It took him a while to get used to it, having grown up in the UK, but now it's just part of his, like, and now when he comes back to visit, he'll open my windows and I'm like, what are you doing?
We do that too, and I've not actually realised before now that people don't do that in life. We just grow up thinking it's something you do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just think those kind of... Sorry, go on.
And I don't think it's a temperature, because growing up we've had more harsh winters than we have here. Like, a lot harsher winters than we have here. And even in winter time we'd still air our house, and we would still go outside. Obviously we had the snow, so that was an entirely different story. We would go outside for the snow. But yeah, no, you would find something to do, and that's the thing, you find something to do no matter the weather, and there is always something to learn from nature if we go out, no matter the weather as well. This is another kind of popular area, going back to the green mindfulness bit. How do we learn from nature in terms of even our attitudes, being patient. Patience is one of the quality of mindfulness, and how better can we learn patience if not observing nature? It has its own pace, it has it's stubborn many times, but well, the UK weather is a bit different, but generally if we observe trees, if we observe animals, if we observe everything around, there are those qualities that we can learn from it. And I think here that's what's stopping people in many ways to kind of interact with nature, is that connection, that teaching from nature that's not really present in our lives anymore. I remember growing up, every single kid I know, including myself, we knew how all the trees were called. We knew how to recognize trees by their leaves. We all had a dried flower planter thingy where we would take notes. This is like 5, 6, 7 years old kids. Everyone had it. We knew all the animals. We knew so much about it, and it was just ingrained that you learn from it. You learn to stand tall. You learn to wait for your turn. You learn that sometimes you're sad, the weather is not nice, that's okay. Sometimes, it comes the sun, you smile. So we've associated a lot of our growing with that. And I think that is something that's missing here, is that connection. We don't need nature to teach us anything here. We just stay inside, we have everything at our doorstep. And I think that is quite different.
That's really interesting, yeah, the fact that it actually could be something that's ingrained in our educational system. And like you said, it's that I think because we did industrialise so quickly, we've become technologically kind of dependent quite quickly, sort of, I think, in the UK as well. We've always got to that point where, you're right, we don't need to go out. We've kind of almost, and it's just not part of our narrative, I suppose, in the same way. Yeah.
But I feel like there is a shift now where more and more people start to understand the importance of green spaces. They start to see how good it does to their well-being, because we are just rotting in bed now.
Bed rotting, yeah.
Yeah, we start to feel a bit more collectively the impact of not interacting with nature, and to be more aware of it. So in some way there is that element of almost like collective awakening. I know that's a big word, and I don't mean in a weird way, but there are a lot of people, and it's really mediatized, and we see that more people engage with nature. So there is a shift. There are more and more initiatives in schools. There are a lot more like forest schools, and lots of fun. So we make it fun for kids. It's becoming popular now to go hiking. There are groups with random strangers. You go hiking with them because we are so isolated. We don't have the friends we would normally go out with anymore. So we just join these random groups. So there is a shift, and I can see it, and with the research coming out as well, with gardening becoming very popular again, with all the granny hobbies, they are becoming popular again. So we can see that shift, and it seems to be a boom in the society in that way, and it seems to be a boom in research in that way as well. And that is, going back, like you said, with the history, in, just before the 2000, kind of late 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of interest in this element specifically on what is our relationship with nature, how is nature impacting our well-being. So, things like attention restoration theory, stress reduction theory, these are all eco-psychology. These are all theories that came out saying that we have an innate affinity to nature, whether we want it or not, consciously, unconsciously. If we pay attention to it, it's good for our mental health, it's good for our attention and concentration, and there was a big kind of wave of research in this area at the time. Then it's been neglected for a while, and now it's becoming popular again. So how we see the trends with the clothes, with everything shifting, that's mindfulness and the environmental aspect of it coming back again. So I think there is hope.
It's good.
I do wonder, because it's something that kind of you both mentioned, you talk about like being more popular in the media, is this like the influence of like digitizing nature. So I think one of the issues might be, because everybody's got their phones and you can bed rot and you can go through stuff, is like you've got all these amazing programs like Blue Planet and all the work that like David Attenborough is doing and so on. But like I go through my Instagram feed and I'm going through it and I'm just like, oh yeah, I like all these obscure animals that are like, I would never, oh yeah, that's a hyrax and that's an aardvark and that's an echidna, as I'm going through, and all of these animals that aren't on my doorstep, and then I go outside and I'm like, is that a weasel? Is that a ferret? Like, I don't know. And I don't know if like there's maybe this issue of like globalization affecting your integration with your environment, because like I can recognize plants from the other side of the world. Yeah. I can tell you what a baobab tree looks like. I can tell you about bamboo, but I can't tell you anything about the tree that's across the road from the office. Like, I don't think it's an oak, but I don't know. And like, I'm still kind of engaging with nature, but it's not in the same way as kind of like we're talking about, like going out and actively doing stuff with it. I don't know if you know anything about like the difference between those approaches.
That is very interesting what you're saying, and I think how documentaries are generally seen in research, although they're not very it's not a very popular topic anymore. There used to be a wave of documentaries and how they impact, and eco-documentaries as well, and these are more of a nudging kind of, so okay, we want you to be interested, we want you to be aware of the global context, with the hope that you will apply that knowledge into your local environment. There is definitely a gap in between, okay, how do we take it from the global context into the local environment? There is, but technically it should make people more curious about their local environment as well, or make them understand that events are connected across the globe as well. You mentioned David Attenborough. Many of his documentaries emphasize on this element. What we do here impacts the global south. The Amazon is not in isolation, they are just chilling by itself. It's impacted by everything we do here as well. So there is that element of connectivity and systematic thinking, but then again, many people won't really go into thinking that, because that is very high order cognition to think systematically. But that is the hope, that it would prompt you, it would nudge you to take some kind of action or be more aware at a localized level as well. Some of the things may be directly relevant to us, some of the things may not be. For example, how was it called? The documentary around fishing and fishing practices, or the meat consumption one with cows and the scandal with labels and all that. We can see those products here as well, so we can pay attention to the labels and everything. But yeah, there is definitely a gap.
I think, yeah, kind of, we mentioned it, I think, was it last week or the week before, or the last episode or the episode before, that I'd stopped consuming media and news. And since I'd stopped kind of having more of a global sort of outlook, I'd started noticing things in my immediate environment a little bit more. So I think, yeah, I know what you're saying, that you would hope that if they were giving that kind of, telling you how wonderful the world is, that then would give you a vested sort of like interest maybe also in like your local environment. But I don't know, I've certainly found that since I've kind of come off kind of media and kind of paying attention to sort of like what is not on my doorstep anymore, my focus has shifted more locally. But I don't know whether or not that is just a broader problem with sort of social media and it just kind of filling up the space that that mental space that you have maybe to actually just generally notice things kind of thing. And I think I used the example of I walked down the street and I saw some white bluebells. Do you call them white bells? I don't know. But I noticed them and I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever seen them on the side of the street before. Like, kind of, they're not as common as like the other types, obviously. And I just don't think I would have ever noticed that had my mind been preoccupied with what is happening in, a war or whatever is going on sort of like in the rest of the world. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to be said for just having general capacity to think about these extra things in the environment, when if you're spending so much time actually just worrying about self-preservation maybe in your day-to-day, cost of living, blah blah blah. So yeah,
the strains we experience on a daily basis are definitely a barrier to thinking about it, because like you said, if I just need to keep myself on a line where I'm surviving, where I'm barely out of burnout, where I need to worry about heating my home, eating, all these more primary needs, we tend not to think so much about the environment. But with that, there is always an element of the environment, because if we think systematically enough, food is our environment, how the world is in terms of nature, it will impact how much food costs, how much we exploit natural resources, is how much we are going to pay for all our services. So I think many people don't really make this association that at the end of the day it's us living on a planet and everything that we do is dependent on that planet. And we don't realize how much we interact with nature. We interact with nature right now, yes, we've got that plant, but that's not half of it, All our clothes have some kind of nature in them. A lot of what this building is made of has some kind of nature in it, or it impacted nature in some way.
Well, I feel like everything must be. We didn't start with any of these atoms, right? They all come from the earth in some way. We can't just magically create.
So that's the thing. We make that separation from it, whereas in fact everything we do, it's related to it, but we don't see it that way. And I think in some way is the individualistic culture coming up here as well. We've separated not only from nature, we've separated from each other a lot as well, and that is connected because we see that people who have stronger communities, they tend to think more about the natural environment as well. Many communities still think about the natural environment as being part of their community, so there is that again, going back to how connected we feel, how much we feel like we need it. That is an element of it. When it's not ingrained in your mind that it's something you constantly have an exchange with, these problems seem distant, and your mental health and your food and all of this, they seem separate.
It's reminded me of something that so I've had Jackie Abel come over from, I think it's a centre for, I'm going to get the research centre name wrong. It's something like agriculture and water resilience, but they may have rebranded themselves. They're over in slightly different
they've got a new place, I think.
Yeah, it's slightly separate, like towards Brighton Pools, I think. That's where their research centre is. And she's come over, and I was really lucky to work in Zambia for a couple of years on a Literacy and Lions project, and she's come over and done a few sessions on kind of like environmentalism and psychology. And sometimes she speaks about this idea of potentially environmentalism being seen as a bit of a middle class Western issue. I don't know if issue's the right word, but it's almost like a nice to have to worry about kind of problem, whereas for some people it's either something that can't be averted or something that they can't focus on, or again, you know, we talk about kind of like it's very easy for us to sort of sit here in the UK and kind of talk about how lion conservation is incredibly important and we need to dedicate space to this within Zambia because Zambia needs lions, but then actually to go out into the rural community in Zambia and say, you know, are you going to potentially sort of like, you know, put measures in place to get rid of lions because they could affect your livestock and those kind of things, like protecting livestock for those individuals is more important than it would be necessarily, you know, preserving a lion population. So it's very easy for us to have this take on environmentalism and for the rest of the world as well, but we're definitely coming from a very sort of privileged kind of position. So I don't know if you've read about these kind of things or there's a feeling in the literature about this idea.
There is more around how the natural resources impact the people. So yes, for us, again, it's a separate issue and it's something nice to have to think about the environmental crisis. But for other people, social and environmental justice and injustice are completely interconnected because those communities that you talk about, they may be impacted by climate change and things that we do in other ways. So it's not nature just about animals, but it's about having, you know, a clean water. That is a very important resource for so many communities there, so that is directly related to the environment. Having you know, a place to safely live on for the duration of the year as well, not full on natural disasters, because natural disasters are more and more common in some parts of the world as well. So for them, they don't think about nature and environmentalism in the same way that we think, because again, for them it's very interconnected to their social element. So there isn't really a full-on separation between environmental and social justice in that part. So we see them again here very separate, but they're not.
I've got a question about maybe like a different group of people, the people that kind of like despair at like the lack of impact of what you can do as an individual. So like, you know, we're saying that try to live as green as I can, try to walk, try public transport and so on, but when like the water companies are dumping waste, when Taylor Swift takes a 15-minute flight instead of getting a taxi or whatever, like there's all of these, like, you know, I worked in retail for a couple of years, and the amount of waste plastic that can't be recycled that just gets thrown out daily, and I'm going, I've got this one can that I used today that I'm going to go and recycle. It feels like such a minuscule drop in the ocean. Like, I don't, like, how do we deal with that?
It is a big thing, and there is where compassion and self-compassion come in quite strongly as well. It's going back to a point I made before, is knowing that you do your part and that's all that you can do. So, you know, the climate change report, for example, says that to meet sustainability targets, we need a lot of individual behavioral change, because at the end of the day, individuals make the collective. So on a small scale, your action may seem very, very insignificant, but when your actions are a collective action, they are a bit less insignificant. And then thinking that some of us may have some influence on policy making, some of us will become directors, some of us will become influential in the area, and we can drive the positive change on. So that's how the research says that many people can kind of keep their hope thinking about these things. You may seem alone in the little things that you do, but you are not alone, because we do form a collective, and some of us in the collective will have the capacity to take decisions and to make bigger changes. And with the generations kind of coming, if they're trained to have those bigger kind of changes in mind as they go, if more and more changes are happening, good things are happening as well, because there are so many good initiatives as well, and they come from people like me, from people like you, who just have a personal interest, but then they go on and do something bigger for more people. So that is helpful. And not being too harsh with yourself when you've used a straw or whatever. That's not ideal, but that's what you could do in that moment. So going back to doing everything we can with the resources we have.
You've just reminded me, though, again, similar to what Alex was saying, how sometimes you can feel powerless. I went into the shop the other day and I saw that they were selling reusable plastic straws, but they were just plastic straws, but they just stamped reusable on them, and I was just like, I suppose in theory you could wash them, but like, this is what we've banned, isn't it? Like, and it just comes back to this idea that it's the companies themselves that are prioritising profit, but it's very hard to tax companies at that kind of level, because all they'll do is go elsewhere to I don't know how we fix that politically, so
I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, if you're a company that all you do is make like junk plastic that nobody actually really wants, it's not a problem if they go elsewhere.
Oh, true.
Well, production is driven by demand.
True, yeah.
So if enough of us don't have the demand, don't give the demand for it, we see so many unsustainable companies making less profit, and it's a very long-term shift. It's not something that is happening today or tomorrow. No, it's very long-term, and that's why sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because it's a long journey, and we need to acknowledge that things don't happen quickly, as they shouldn't. And I think there is a discrepancy. I'm not going to go too much into the politics, but how politics works and policies and company law and everything, they're fought for short-term results. They're fought for, okay, we have a mandate for this many years and this is what we want to do. The changes we require, they're longer term. They require a longer term vision. So there is that conflict there. But again, more and more people with power take the right decisions, and then with less demand for less sustainable products, we can only hope. We don't know where we are going, but there is an element of attention and what we want to pay attention to. Like the very popular picture that says, watch the news about the world and you will see that you live in a horrible place. Visit the world and you will meet so many lovely people, and you will see that the world is lovely. It's in some way, similar. It's what we pay attention to. For example, I do subscribe to positive climate news pages and all these things, because if you just pay attention to what is going down, you're going down. So we need to be intentional with what we focus our attention on, so we don't go into that helplessness, because the eco emotions, as in anxiety, depression, helplessness, they're experienced as general anxiety, general depression, but in relation to the climate. So we need to protect ourselves from those things as well, like we protect ourselves with everything else.
I like that phrase, eco-emotions. Like, that's another one I'm gonna try and remember. But yeah.
Okay. Have you got any advice for the viewers? We'll wrap up any take-home messages for people?
I think it's important to direct our attention to some of the things that we do on a daily basis. So things that we eat, what we put on our body, so that's all the toiletries, clothes, everything that comes in contact with ourselves. If we actually pay attention to them, how they feel, how they're made, we will see that the more sustainable choices are the choices that are good for us. So when we do good for the environment, we do good for us, and that is something that drives a lot of people. And then remembering that you're only human and we can only do what we can do today and nothing more.
That's really good.
Awesome. And then I think the cap is we also need a definition and scales
We do.
for measuring these as well.
Research coming soon.
Consume less, that's what I'm going to go forward with, and then save money, consume less.
I guess reduce, reuse, recycle, reduce is the first one, so I guess it goes with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's been really, really interesting getting to grips with how we interact with our world and re-rationalising it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, kind of like this hopelessness of, well, I do this, but how much of an impact does it make? It's good to remind ourselves to focus that it's still an impact, even if it's a small one. So I think it's been very helpful. So, I think we'll wrap that up. So thank you very much for joining us this week.
Thank you.
No doubt we'll have you back at some point in the future. Something will happen and we'll be like, come in and tell us about why this happened. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.